Emeka was a man burdened by poverty. His days were spent laboring in the fields, and his nights were filled with restless sleep as he worried about how to provide for his family. The small plot of land he farmed yielded little, and the hut he called home was barely standing. Despite his hard work, he could never seem to rise above his circumstances. The villagers pitied Emeka, but they also whispered about his misfortune, believing he was cursed. Yet, Emeka never lost hope. He dreamed of a day when he would break free from the shackles of poverty and provide his family with the life they deserved. One evening, after another long day in the fields, Emeka found himself in a local bar, trying to forget his troubles. It was there that he heard the story that would change his life forever. The bar was filled with the usual crowd of weary men, all seeking comfort in drink and conversation. But that night, the usual chatter died down as an old man, known for his stories, began to speak. His voice was low and gravely, drawing the attention of everyone in the room. "I once knew a man," the old storyteller began, "who had nothing but the clothes on his back and the will to change his fate. He was desperate, much like many of you here tonight. But this man heard of a secret, a path to unimaginable wealth, though it came with a price." The room fell silent, the men hanging on the old man's every word. Emeka, sitting in the corner, felt a chill run down his spine. The man was told of a ritual, one that involved sleeping in a coffin for 7 days. It was said that if one could survive the ordeal, riches beyond imaginations will be theirs. But it was not for the faint of heart. The coffin was no ordinary one. It was a place where the living met the dead, where spirits tested the strength of your soul. The old man paused, taking a sip from his drink as the men leaned in closer, eager to hear more. "Many tried and failed," he continued, his voice dropping to a whisper. "But those who succeeded, they were never the same. Some say they were blessed, others say they were cursed. But all agree on one thing: they never knew poverty again." Emeka left the bar that night with the old man's words ringing in his ears. Could this be the answer he had been searching for? The way out of the misery that had plagued him and his family for so long? Determined to change his fate, Emeka sought out Okoro, the man rumored to possess knowledge of the ritual. Okoro lived deep in the forest, far from the village, in a place where few dared to go. The journey to his hut was long and treacherous, but Emeka's desperation pushed him forward. When Emeka finally arrived, the sun was just beginning to rise, casting long shadows through the trees. The small hut looked ancient, as if it had stood in that forest for centuries. Okoro stood at the entrance, as if he had been expecting Emeka. "You seek wealth," Okoro said, his voice as deep as the forest around them. "But are you willing to pay the price?" Emeka nodded, his heart pounding in his chest. "I am," he replied, his voice steady. Okoro studied Emeka for a moment before stepping aside to let him into the hut. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of herbs and incense. The walls were lined with strange symbols, and in the center of the room laid an old wooden coffin. Okoro explained the ritual to Emeka in detail. The coffin was more than just a box. It was a bridge between the living and the dead. For 7 days, Emeka would have to lie inside, facing whatever spirit came to test him. He was not to move, speak, or show fear, no matter what happened. On the first day, Emeka entered the coffin with a mixture of fear and determination. The darkness inside was suffocating, and the silence was only broken by the occasional creak of the wood. As the hours passed, Emeka felt the presence of something else in the coffin with him, something cold and malevolent. By the third day, the spirit began to torment him. He heard whispers in the darkness, voices calling his name, accusing him of sins he had never committed. He felt cold hands brushing against his skin, trying to pull him into the abyss. But Emeka remained still, his resolve unbroken. On the fifth day, the torment intensified. The spirits showed him visions of his worst fears, his family suffering, his own death. They tried to break him, but Emeka clung to the thought of the wealth that awaited him. He knew he had to endure, no matter the cost. Finally, on the seventh day, the torment ceased. Emeka was weak and exhausted, but he had survived. When Okoro opened the coffin, Emeka was greeted by the light of the morning sun, a sight he thought he would never see again. Okoro looked at Emeka with a mix of respect and curiosity. "You have done well," he said. "Few have the strength to endure what you have. Now, the wealth you seek shall be yours." Emeka was led to a small shrine within the hut, where Okoro performed a final ritual. The air was thick with the scent of burning incense, and the room was dimly lit by flickering candles. Okoro chanted in a language that Emeka could not understand, his voice deep and resonant. He sprinkled cowries and palm leaves into a bowl filled with water and handed it to Emeka. "Drink this," Okoro instructed. "It will cleanse your spirit and solidify the wealth that is now yours." Emeka drank from the bowl, feeling a surge of energy as the liquid flowed through him. The fatigue and fear that had gripped him for the past 7 days were washed away, replaced by a sense of calm and peace. "It is done," Okoro said. "The spirits have granted you wealth. From this day forth, you will prosper in all that you do." Emeka returned to the village, but he was no longer the same man who had left 7 days ago. The poverty and despair that had once clung to him like a shadow were gone, replaced by a sense of purpose and confidence. As he walked through the village, the people stared in awe. Emeka, who had once worn rags, was now dressed in fine clothes. His steps were steady, and his head was held high. He greeted the villagers with a smile, but they could see that something had changed within him. News of Emeka's transformation spread quickly. Those who had once looked down on him now whispered in admiration and envy. The once poor young man had returned wealthy, though none knew the true cost of his riches. With his newfound wealth, Emeka quickly transformed his life. He built a grand house for his parents, filled with all the luxuries they had never known. No longer did they have to toil in the fields. Their son's success was their reward. Emeka invested wisely, starting businesses that flourished. He became one of the most respected men in the town, a symbol of success and prosperity. His wealth brought him power and influence, and he used it to help those in need. For a time, Emeka's life was one of bliss. He enjoyed the fruits of his wealth, basking in the admiration of his peers and the comfort of luxury. But as the months passed, something dark began to creep into his life. It started with strange dreams, nightmares of the coffin, of the spirits he had encountered during those 7 days. In his dreams, the spirit whispered to him, reminding him of the price he had paid for his wealth. They showed him visions of his own death, of his family's suffering. Emeka would wake up drenched in sweat, the sense of dread lingering long after the nightmare had ended. At first, Emeka dismissed the dreams as remnants of his ordeal, but soon the spirits began to torment him while he was awake. He would see shadows moving in the corners of his vision, hear voices calling his name when no one was there. The once peaceful nights became a time of terror, and Emeka found himself unable to sleep, fearing what awaited him in the darkness. The wealth that had brought him so much joy now felt like a curse. He tried to ignore the spirits, to focus on his businesses and his family, but their presence grew stronger with each passing day. No amount of money could buy him peace. Unable to endure the torment any longer, Emeka returned to the forest, seeking out Okoro once more. The journey, which had once been filled with hope, was now marked by fear and desperation. The forest seemed darker, the path more treacherous than before. It was as if the very trees knew of Emeka's plight and were conspiring against him. When he finally reached Okoro's hut, the old man was already waiting at the entrance, as if he had known Emeka would return. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes held a glimmer of something, pity, perhaps, or disdain. "You've come back," Okoro said, his voice calm, but with an edge of something darker. The spirits do not give their gifts freely. They always demand something in return. Emeka fell to his knees, his voice trembling as he pleaded with Okoro. "Please, I can't live like this. The spirit won't leave me alone. I need your help." Okoro looked down at Emeka, his expression hardening. There is only one way to appease the spirits. But the ritual is not for the faint of heart. It will require more than just your courage. It will require a sacrifice. Okoro led Emeka to a clearing deep within the forest, a place that seemed untouched by time. In the center of the clearing stood an ancient tree, its gnarled branches reaching towards the sky like skeletal hands. Beneath the tree was a pit, filled with smoldering ashes that gave off a faint, acrid smell. "The spirit demands a sacrifice," Okoro said, opening a small, ornate box he had brought with him. Inside were a knife, a small jar of blood, and a piece of parchment covered in strange symbols. "You must cut your palm and let your blood drip into the pit," Okoro instructed, handing Emeka the knife. "Then, you must recite the words on this parchment. The spirits will ask you to give up something precious to you. Only by doing so can you free yourself from this torment." Emeka's hands shook as he took the knife, the cold metal feeling like ice against his skin. He looked at the parchment, but the symbols made no sense to him. His heart raced as he realized the gravity of what he was about to do. "But what do I have to sacrifice?" Emeka asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Okoro's eyes bored into him, his expression as stern as ever. "That is for the spirits to decide." Emeka hesitated, fear gripping him. But the thought of continuing to live under the spirit's torment was unbearable. With a deep breath, he made a small cut on his palm, letting the blood drip into the pit. As he recited the words on the parchment, the air around him grew thick and the shadows seemed to come alive. Suddenly, a voice boomed from the darkness, echoing through the clearing. "What will you give us in exchange for your freedom?" Emeka's mind raced. What could he possibly offer that would satisfy the spirits? But before he could answer, the spirits spoke again, their voices filled with malice. "Give us the life of your firstborn." Emeka's heart stopped. His firstborn? The thought was too much to bear. He had gained wealth to provide for his family, not to destroy it. His hands trembled as he dropped the parchment, stepping back from the pit. I can't do that, Emeka stammered, his voice shaking with fear and guilt. The spirits' voices grew louder, angrier. Then you will suffer the consequences of your greed. The wealth you sought will become your curse. Emeka fled, declaring, the spirit's laughter ringing in his ears. He returned to the village, but the peace he had hoped for was gone. The spirit had rejected his sacrifice, and now they would take what they wanted by force. Emeka's life began to unravel. One by one, his children fell ill with mysterious ailments that no doctor could cure. They withered away before his eyes, their once bright and lively spirits crushed under the weight of the curse. Emeka was powerless to stop it. His wealth, once a source of pride, now felt like a chain around his neck. He watched in horror as the spirits claimed his children, taking them from him one by one. The villagers, once envious of his success, now whispered behind his back, saying that his wealth was cursed. The weight of his guilt grew heavier with each passing day. The spirit's torment continued, their whispers filling his ears, reminding him of the price he had refused to pay. His once strong body began to fail him, and he grew weak and frail, his health deteriorating rapidly. Finally, Emeka could bear it no longer. The wealth he had gained at such a high cost had brought him nothing but sorrow and loss. His heart, broken by the death of his children and the torment of the spirit, could take no more. One cold dark night, Emeka fell into a deep sleep from which he would never wake. The spirits had claimed their final victim, and his wealth was left to the remaining members of his family. A cruel reminder of the price he had paid. Emeka's death was met with a mix of sadness and relief. The villagers mourned the loss of a man who had once been their pride, but they also whispered that it was the spirits who had claimed him, punishing him for his greed. His remaining children inherited his wealth, but it was a bittersweet inheritance. The grand house that had once been filled with laughter was now silent, haunted by the memories of those who had been lost. The businesses that had once flourished now struggled as the villagers believed the curse of the spirits lingered over them. Emeka's story became a cautionary tale, a reminder of the dangers of seeking wealth at any cost. The villagers would tell the story to their children, warning them that the spirits always demand their due, and that no amount of riches is worth the price of one's soul. And so, Emeka's legacy lived on, not as a tale of success, but as a warning to those who would seek to cheat fate. The house where he had once lived stood as a silent monument to his ambition and his downfall, a place where the spirits still whispered, waiting for their next victim. Years passed, but Emeka's mansion remained untouched, a place of fear and mystery. The villagers avoided it, claiming to hear strange noises and see ghostly figures in the windows at night. Some said the spirit of Emeka's children still roamed the halls, unable to find peace, while others believed that Emeka himself was trapped there, doomed to relive his final days in endless torment. The mansion became a symbol of the curse that had befallen Emeka and his family. No one dared to enter, and even those who lived nearby would hurry past, heads down, hoping to avoid the gaze of the spirits within. Despite the wealth that was passed on to Emeka's surviving children, they too were haunted by their father's choices. The businesses struggled, and no matter how much they tried to distance themselves from the mansion, the shadow of Emeka's curse followed them. They could not escape the whispers of the villagers, nor the fear that their father's fate would eventually become their own. One day, Emeka's eldest surviving son, Chidi, decided that enough was enough. He had grown tired of living under the weight of his father's sins and the fear of the spirits. He knew that the only way to break the curse was to confront it head-on. Chidi returned to the mansion, determined to put an end to the torment that had plagued his family for years. Armed with knowledge of traditional rituals passed down from elders, he sought out Okoro, who was now an old man, even more ancient and frail than before. Chidi begged Okoro to help him lift the curse that had destroyed his family. Okoro, seeing the desperation in the young man's eyes, agreed to assist, but he warned Chidi that the task would not be easy. The spirits were powerful, and they would not give up their hold on the mansion without a fight. Okoro and Chidi prepared for the ritual, gathering the necessary ingredients and symbols. On a stormy night, they entered the mansion's grounds, the air thick with the presence of the spirits. The wind howled, and the shadows seemed to dance with anticipation as they began the ritual. Chidi, with Okoro's guidance, lit a large fire in the garden, and together they drew a circle of protection around it, using symbols and herbs known to ward off evil spirits. As the fire crackled and the smoke rose into the night, Okoro began to chant, his voice strong despite his age. Chidi followed suit, reciting the ancient words passed down to him, his voice steady with determination. As they chanted, the spirits grew restless, their whispers turning into angry cries that echoed through the night. The mansion seemed to tremble, as if the very foundations were being shaken by the spirit's fury. But Chidi did not waver. He knew that this was his only chance to free his family from the curse. As the ritual reached its climax, Chidi threw the final offering into the fire, a piece of the parchment that Emeka had once used, now inscribed with words of banishment. For a moment, everything was still. The spirit's cries had stopped, and the night seemed to hold its breath. Then, slowly, the atmosphere began to change. The oppressive weight that had hung over the mansion lifted, and the shadows that had plagued the estate began to fade away. The spirits, their anger appeased, finally departed, leaving the mansion in peace for the first time in years. The curse that had haunted Emeka's family was lifted, and the spirit's hold on the mansion was broken. Chidi stood tall, his heart filled with relief. He had done what his father could not. He had faced the spirits and emerged victorious. But as he looked at the mansion, now bathed in a soft, ethereal light, he knew that the legacy of his father's greed would never truly leave him. The mansion would always be a reminder of the price his family had paid. In the years that followed, Chidi and his family worked to restore the mansion and rebuild their lives. The wealth that had once seemed cursed was now a tool for good, used to help the villagers and mend the wounds that had been inflicted by Emeka's choices. The mansion, once feared and shunned, became a place of renewal and hope. Chidi's children grew up, hearing the story of their grandfather's rise and fall, but they also learned of their father's bravery and determination to break the cycle of greed and destruction. Chidi knew that the past could never be erased, but he was determined to create a better future for his family, a future free from the shadows of the past. And so, Emeka's story became more than just a cautionary tale. It became a story of redemption, of a family that had faced the consequences of their choices and emerged stronger on the other side. The spirits were gone, but their lesson remained, that true wealth is not measured by gold or riches, but by the strength of one's heart and the choices one makes.